I'm just going to spend a minute or two, couple minutes, the rest of our time, 10 minutes or so, talking here. I constantly accuse my wife of being kind of a eternal pessimist, always kind of looking at the negative side of things. She says, no, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. That's what she calls it. I say, no, you're a pessimist. She says, no, I'm a realist. I say, all right. But if you're a pessimist, if you're that glass is half empty type of person, the pessimist, you're called a glass is half empty. So if you're kind of the eternal optimist, what are you? Half full, yeah. On the other hand, if you put forth a whole bunch of effort into a project or into a sports game and you come up short, you are left what-handed? Left empty-handed. Yeah, if you put forth a bunch of effort and you don't succeed or don't come through with the win, you're left empty-handed. What if you have worked all day and you're really tired, you've got nothing left, you have no energy left, but you still have to keep on going, you're running on empty, or fumes, or come on, Tom, our theme is empty here. What do people? We've got two parents here getting ready to send one daughter off to college. What happens when you send all your kids off to college and nobody's left? Parents are left with what? Empty nest syndrome. So as we're getting close to noon here, and maybe we smell some of the donuts or things, or we're getting hungry, we've got a what? Empty stomach. What are our kids going to do, or what are we going to do when we go home and eat a bunch of candy? We're going to consume what type of calories? Empty calories. That's what we're going to do. So, we've got all these sayings that have empty in them, and they're pretty much all downers. I really couldn't think of too many sentences or too many of those little phrases that you can think of that's got empty in it that isn't like a big positive, that isn't a positive thing. They're all kind of downers, that emptiness is kind of a downer. But today, thinking of Jesus in the empty tomb, empty with Jesus rising and leaving that tomb empty, he's going to take what we typically think of as empty and really turn it on its head, turn it 180 degrees. So emptiness, all of our phrases about emptiness can really take on a different meaning when we think about Jesus in his resurrection and the empty tomb. So I just want to take a minute or two thinking about that, about just this empty tomb and how at first it's kind of a downer. Because as we saw in the skit today and as we read, Mary goes to the tomb and she's obviously devastated, and it's really hard to get a grasp of kind of what went on. They had all these people, these disciples and these women had been following Jesus for, some time, some of them up to 3 years, some of them less than that. This person that they had kind of invested everything into for 3 years is pretty much, essentially is executed, is killed. And everything that they had kind of invested themselves in essentially seems to come to a crashing halt. And it's kind of hard because we know the story, we know the whole story. It's hard not to kind of read in the ending to it. But if we weren't part of that, if we didn't know the ending, and everything we had invested ourselves in for 3 years had come to a crashing halt, we'd have a pretty good reason to have that, downer feeling that this isn't the way it's supposed to end. So Mary heads to the tomb with some other people, and she gets there, and what happens? What does she find? She finds the empty tomb. The body has been gone, and so, typically bodies don't disappear out of graves. It'd be like going to a grave and there's just a big old empty pit. Everything's gone out of there. When you go to a grave, you expect there's a grave coffin or whatever's there. But she goes and the tomb is empty. There's nothing there. And so she immediately thinks that the body has been stolen, because typically bodies don't just vanish, So she goes there, and somebody appears to her, an angel appears to her and said, Mary, what are you doing here? You don't go looking at, Jesus is alive. You don't go to a tomb looking for people alive. You don't hang out in the cemetery looking for people who are alive, do you? You don't. When I'm looking for somebody, you don't go hang out in the cemetery. And Mary always told that. Jesus is not here. He's gone. But see, Jesus' body is left. And the important thing is it's left of its own accord. It isn't gone. It hasn't just vanished. It hasn't been stolen. But the body has left of its own accord. And this isn't zombie Jesus, okay? You know, if any of you like zombie movies, it isn't just that he's kind of animated but dead. This is, Jesus has come back to life. He is living again. You know, and those people back then, even a couple thousand years ago, I mean, they weren't stupid. They weren't idiots. They didn't believe that people came back to life any more than we do today. Any more than if, you know, my grandfather or somebody came back to life. You know, we don't believe that happens very much. We don't believe it happens at all today, really. And they didn't believe it happened then, really, either. So it's not like these people were really gullible or dumb or anything. And Jesus had to prove it to them. You know, they had to prove it. He had to show himself to them. And even one of the guys had to stick his fingers in places that had been jabbed and stabbed and things before he got it. You know, the bodies don't come back to life. But here we have Jesus. He came back to life, and he's gone. He's made his exit, and he reappears. And in that death and in that resurrection, kind of that empty tomb takes on life and gives us life. And really, isn't that what Easter is about? We've been talking about that. Easter is about newness of life. You know, it is about turning pessimism into optimism. Now, why did Jesus die? You know, that's a good question to ask. Fiona's got this little book at home that we've read it so much it's kind of like fallen apart. You know, do you have those as a kid or as a parent? You had those books as a kid you read till the covers kind of have disengaged from the papers. You know, that's what happened with this book. And it asks the question, why did Jesus have to die? Or why did Jesus die? And the answer given in this children's book is so that others could live. And that's a really good answer. Why did Jesus die? So that others could live. So that everybody in here, everybody who looks to him could live. You know, and that's really what it's about. That's what it's about today, is taking Jesus' life, his death, his resurrection, that empty tomb, and realizing that it's life. It's newness of life. You know, it's about the ability of Jesus now to take everything in our lives, the emptiness, the sadness, the sorrow, the junk in our lives, and just take it away and give us that newness of life, like the dead leaves that fall off the tree and the buds that come up in April. That newness of life. You know, I've got, you know, I think, how many of you guys have like junk and stuff that you try not to think about in your past, in your life? I know I do. I've got, you know, I really like 70s music, kind of like classic rock, but there's certain artists I just can't listen to because it reminds me of like all the junk that I used to do, all the like the crappy things in my life. Like I can't listen to Bob Seger. I used to love Bob Seger, but I can't listen to him anymore because it just like reminds me of all the crappy things I've done in my life, and I just can't do that. Does anybody else have that? They've just got artists that maybe they just can't listen to anymore, something that the place they can't go because it just reminds them of all the crappy things that you've done in your life. Or maybe that's just me. I don't know. Does anybody else do that? A few of you do. Yeah. You know, I just, Bob Seger and John Mellencamp, he's another one. I can't listen to his stuff because it just reminds me of all the bad things I've done in my life. But Jesus takes that and gives us a fresh start. That's what Easter's about. And so Easter, you know, Easter is about remembering what went on 2,000 years ago. Jesus' life, his death, and his resurrection. That's what Easter is. But we can't stop there. It's not just about remembering something that happened a long time ago. You know, as good as that is, that's not where it can end, okay? Because Jesus gives us the opportunity to take what happened 2,000 years ago and make it real in our lives today. And that's really the message of Easter. That Jesus' resurrection, his life, can be made real today. In your life and in my life. Now, how many of you grew up in church? How many grew up like going to church as a kid? Did anybody here grow up going to church as a kid? Some of you did. You know, in the denomination and in the kind of the church that I grew up, what would happen after every service is the old lady would come up to the organ and she'd start playing a song and play it for like a half hour until the pastor had kind of squeezed every last emotion out of the people in the crowd. And I'm not going to do that today, all right? So Dawn, you don't have to make your way forward. So, you know, but what I want you to do is realize, no matter where you are today in kind of your spiritual journey, whether you haven't begun it again, whether you already have begun it again, whether you're, you know, wherever you are, you know, I know some of you have already said, you know, Easter is real in my life today. Some of you may be, you know, no, that's not for me yet. And some of you may be like, you know, that the Jesus thing kind of makes sense, but I've got some more questions about that. I don't know where you are today. But the thing is that Easter can be made real in your life today. And I just want you to know that if you leave here today, if you came with somebody, talk to who you came with today. Or talk to me afterwards. Or talk with Dawn, raise your hand there. Talk with Dawn afterwards. You know, we'll be hanging out. Feel free to come back. You know, if you've got more questions, come back. Because that's really what all of us are here to do, is to make Jesus' life real in our lives today. That's what we're about. We kind of go through the journey together. So I invite you to think about that today. Think about this. How can Jesus be made real in my life today? And how can he continue to be made real in my life today, no matter where you are kind of in that spectrum of the spiritual journey? But that's where I want to leave you with today is, let's leave here remembering what happened 2,000 years ago, but not stop there. How that can be made real in our lives today. So feel free to approach us to talk about that afterwards. Talk with the person that you came with. And come back and experience it with us next week and whenever you get a chance. Let's close in prayer this morning. Father, thank you for this Easter morning. Thank you for newness of life, for the greenery, for the weather, for just a day to remember that this is about kind of starting over, the new life of creation, of nature, but also the new life that Jesus provides to us through his death and through his resurrection in his life, Lord. May Easter be something we remember, but more importantly, it be something that is real in our lives today. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be together and to celebrate this day together. As we leave here this morning, give us joy and blessings as we meet possibly with family or friends or whatever we do for the rest of the day. And may we bring you praise and glory and honor. In Jesus' name, amen. So go today in the celebration of a risen Christ, but don't just let it end here. Take it with you and spread that joy and celebration to others.